Funny thing about the day I walked across that stage at Johns Hopkins is that I remember every single detail except the sound of applause. I remember the weight of my white coat. I remember the smell of the auditorium, floor wax and someone's too strong perfume 2 rows ahead. I remember looking out at the seats and finding the exact spot where my family was supposed to be sitting. I remember the empty chairs. I grew up in Decatur, Illinois. If you've never been, picture flat land, grain elevators on the horizon, and a town where everybody knows whose kid you are before they know your name. My dad worked maintenance at the county facility for 22 years. My mom waitressed at the same diner from the time she was 19 until she wasn't anymore. We weren't poor in the way people dramatize poverty. We had a house. We had food. What we didn't have was margin, no room for mistakes, no cushion for bad luck, and absolutely no language for a daughter who wanted to become a doctor. My brother was 3 years younger than me. His name is Cole. Cole was the one people talked about at the 4th of July cookouts and at church and at my parents' kitchen table every single Sunday. Cole played baseball from the time he was 5 years old. By the time he was in high school, my dad had driven him to tournaments in 4 different states, and my mom had a whole album on her phone. Not a folder, an actual dedicated album, just for Cole's game photos. He was good. Not scouts knocking on the door good, but good enough that it became the whole personality of our family. We were a baseball family. Cole's family. I was just the other one. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because it's the most accurate description I have. I wasn't treated badly. I wasn't beaten or starved or locked in a room. What happened to me was quieter than that and somehow harder to explain to people who haven't lived it. It's the kind of thing where you describe it out loud and someone always says, "Well, I'm sure they didn't mean it that way." And maybe they didn't, but the outcome is the same either way. I was 11 the first time I understood that my achievements had a ceiling in that house and Cole's didn't. I had won the regional science fair. Not just one, I had taken first place in the state junior division with a project on water filtration that my teacher, Mrs. Alderman, said was the best she'd seen in 15 years of teaching. The school put my name on a banner. There was a small write-up in the local paper. I came home with a ribbon the size of my torso, and my mother said, "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetie," and then turned back to the sink where she was washing dishes, and my dad said, "Good job, Bug," from behind the newspaper, and that was it. The following weekend, Cole's team won a tournament in Springfield and my parents drove 4 hours round trip and took 100 photos and my mom cried from happiness in the parking lot. I kept that ribbon in my closet for a long time. Eventually, I threw it away. I don't remember when. High school was where I decided to stop waiting for them to notice and start building something that couldn't be ignored. I took every AP class my school offered. I studied on weekends when my friends were at parties. I applied for the summer research internship at the University of Illinois and got it, one of 6 students in the state selected that year. I was 16. My parents didn't come to the send-off ceremony. Cole had a doubleheader. I told myself it was fine. I told myself this so many times that for a while I almost believed it. My grandmother on my mother's side was the only one who ever really saw me. She lived 40 minutes away in a small house that smelled like coffee and lavender, and every time I came over she asked me real questions. Not, "How's school?" but, "What are you learning?" and "What do you think about that?" She kept a notebook where she wrote down things I said that she found interesting. I saw it once. She had quotes from our conversations going back years, things I'd forgotten I'd said. She believed I was going to do something that mattered. She said so plainly, without fanfare, the way people say things when they actually mean them. She died the spring of my junior year of high school. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to gone. She left me $8,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was everything she had saved beyond what she needed to leave for her own burial arrangements. The money came with a letter that said simply, "For whatever comes next." I already know it'll be something worth seeing. I used every dollar of it toward application fees, test prep, and my first semester expenses when the financial aid didn't fully cover. I have never spent money more carefully in my life. I got into Johns Hopkins. I remember sitting in my car in the school parking lot when I opened the email because I'd been too nervous to look at home. I read it 3 times. Then I sat there for a few minutes just listening to the sound of the ventilation system and the distant noise of the football field, and I thought, Grandma would have screamed. I drove home and I told my parents at dinner. My mom looked up from her plate and said, Johns Hopkins? That's the one in Baltimore? I said yes. My dad said, huh. That's far. Cole said, cool, and went back to his phone. I waited. I genuinely waited, sitting there with my fork in my hand, for some version of what my grandmother would have given me. Some recognition that this was extraordinary, that a girl from Decatur, Illinois, whose family had never produced a single college graduate, had just been accepted to one of the top medical programs in the country. My mom got up to refill her water glass. My dad said, "You'll need to figure out housing." That was the conversation. Later that night, my mom came to my room and hugged me and said she was proud of me and that it was scary how far away it was. That was real. I believe she meant it. But proud and present are 2 different things, and I had been waiting my whole life for the second one. The 4 years of medical school are hard to compress into a paragraph because they were hard in ways I didn't know hardness could take. I was exhausted in a cellular way. There were nights in my second year when I sat on the bathroom floor of my apartment just to feel the coolness of the tile against my legs and remind myself I was still a physical person and not just a brain trying to stay afloat. I had loans accumulating. I was 3 states away from everyone I knew. I ate a lot of peanut butter and a lot of whatever was on sale. I called home every Sunday. These calls lasted about 12 minutes on average. My mom would tell me about the diner, who quit, who got hired, which regular had passed away. My dad would say things were fine. And then almost always, at some point, the conversation would turn to Cole. Cole had played 2 years of junior college ball and then stopped. He was working at an auto parts store and dating a woman named Tina. These are the only 2 facts I knew about his life with any regularity. My parents discussed both in extensive detail every single Sunday. I don't resent Cole. I want to be clear about that. Cole didn't do anything to me. He was just the sun that everything in that house orbited around, and I was Pluto, technically part of the system, far enough out that some people debate whether I counted. My graduation was scheduled for a Thursday in May. I found out about the conflict in February, which was enough time for it to have been handled. My cousin texted me first. Not my parents, my cousin, with a string of congratulations emojis, and then, almost as an afterthought, Cole's thing is the same weekend, right? That's so crazy. Cole's thing was a charity baseball invitational. Adults, former high school players, nothing organized, nothing official. An event that happens every year in Springfield. An event that would happen again the following year and every year after that. My medical school graduation happens once. I called my mom that night and asked directly. I had learned by then to ask directly because anything left indirect in my family got interpreted in the most convenient direction. She said, well, we were already planning on going to Springfield for Cole's thing, and Baltimore is so expensive to get to last minute. I said, Mom, I've been in medical school for 4 years. This isn't last minute. She said, you know how your father is with flying. I said, he flew to Dallas for Cole's tournament 2 years ago. There was a long pause. She said, I just don't think it's going to work out this time, sweetheart. We'll celebrate when you're home for the summer. I hung up the phone and sat very still for a long time. I was sitting at my kitchen table and there was a half-eaten bowl of cereal in front of me. And I just looked at it. The milk was getting warm. I didn't move. I called my dad's cell directly the next morning. My dad has always been the softer one. Not soft enough to stand up to anything, but soft enough that sometimes you can get a real answer out of him. I said, Dad, I need you to come to my graduation. He said, your mom already talked to me about it. I said, I'm not asking Mom. I'm asking you. He was quiet for a moment. I could hear the television in the background. He said, it's just... Cole was really looking forward to having us there. He's been having a rough go of things lately. I said, I have been in medical school, Dad, for 4 years, alone. I have one graduation. One. I am asking you to be there. Another pause. He said, I'll see what I can do. He didn't come. I know I could have kept pushing. I know I could have escalated, could have cried, could have laid out the full emotional case in a way that made it impossible for them to choose wrong. I chose not to. Maybe that was pride. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe some part of me needed to know with absolute clarity what their answer was going to be when I asked plainly and gave them every opportunity to do the right thing. Their answer was Cole's Invitational in Springfield. My attending physician, Dr. Ka Fowler, Okonkwo, found me in the hallway outside the auditorium about 20 minutes before the ceremony and asked if I was all right. I must have looked the way I felt. I told her my family wasn't able to make it. She looked at me for a moment and then she said, "Then we are your family today," and she meant it in the way that my grandmother used to mean things, plainly and without decoration. She sat with me for 5 minutes before we had to line up. It was one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me. I walked across that stage and I shook the dean's hand and I accepted my degree and I smiled. Because I had worked for 8 years to get to this moment and no one's absence was going to hollow it out. The applause was general. It was for all of us. It was still applause. Afterward, there was a reception in the atrium and my friends from my cohort introduced me to their families and everyone was kind. I ate tiny sandwiches and drank sparkling water and laughed at things and meant it. That part was okay. That part was actually okay. My mom texted me a photo of balloons she had bought for the kitchen at home, pink and gold. The caption said, "So proud of you. Can't wait to celebrate." I looked at the photo for a long time. I didn't respond that night. The summer celebration never really happened. I was starting my residency in Baltimore in July, and I went home for 1 week in June, and my mom made my favorite dinner, pot roast and mashed potatoes, and my dad hugged me at the door and said he was proud of me, and Cole showed up and we all watched a movie together and it was fine. It was surface fine, the way things are when everyone has silently agreed not to press on the bruise. Nobody said anything about the graduation. Nobody acknowledged the empty chairs. I stayed in Baltimore after residency started. The weeks turned into months, and the months turned into a rhythm that didn't include Sunday calls anymore. Not because I cut them off all at once, but because I started letting the calls go a little longer between, and then a little longer. And then I realized I was going 4 or 5 weeks without speaking to my parents, and nothing in my life had gotten worse. Things had gotten, in a specific and measurable way, quieter. I am not estranged from my family. I want to be precise about that because it matters. I talk to my mom, maybe once a month. I text my dad a few times. I see them at Thanksgiving and sometimes Christmas. What I did was set down the weight of needing them to understand something they had proven. Repeatedly, they were not able to understand. There's a word in medicine, prognosis. It means your best estimate of how a condition is going to develop based on the available evidence. At some point, I made a prognosis about my relationship with my parents and decided to treat it accordingly. Not abandon it. Just stop expecting it to become something the evidence suggested it wasn't going to become. That sounds clinical because I am, at this point in my life, a clinician. But underneath the clinical framing is something simpler. I miss being someone's kid. I miss the version of parents I used to hope mine might become. I miss my grandmother every single time I do something worth seeing, which is often now, because I worked very hard to make it that way. What I don't miss is sitting at a dinner table and announcing something extraordinary and watching it disappear into the ordinary air of that kitchen. What I don't miss is waiting. Last spring, I got a grant. A real one. Federal funding for research I've been building toward for 3 years. The amount was significant. My department head came to my office personally to congratulate me. My colleagues took me out for drinks. I got a small write-up in the Johns Hopkins newsletter. I called my mom and told her. She said, "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetheart. Cole just got promoted at the auto parts store, actually, store manager now." I said, "That's great, Mom." I meant it. I genuinely meant it. I have no interest in Cole's success being smaller so that mine can be bigger. I only wanted, for 27 years, For there to be enough space in my family's house for both kinds of success to matter. There wasn't. And at some point you stop renovating a house that isn't going to expand and you build your own. Mine is in Baltimore. It has good light in the mornings. I have colleagues who are also friends and a mentor who asks me real questions and a research team that trusts me. I have a life that would have been unimaginable from the kitchen table in Decatur, Illinois, and sometimes I sit with that fact and let it be extraordinary, the way my grandmother always said it would be. The empty chairs were real. The diploma is also real. Both things happened on the same Thursday in May, and I have had to learn to hold them together, which is maybe the hardest residency I've done. But I am, as it turns out, a very good doctor. And I kept the ribbon this time. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since medical school. It's the foundation of everything we do in medicine. This happened and so that happened. Action, consequence, pattern, outcome. You look at the evidence long enough and eventually the story tells itself. The story of my family tells itself the same way. My parents didn't choose Cole over me once. They chose him over and over again, in small ways and large ones, across 20-some years of decisions that probably felt minor to them each time. A tournament over a science fair, a doubleheader over a send-off ceremony, a charity baseball invitational over a medical school graduation. No single choice was a verdict, but all of them together were. What I've had to sit with, and this took me longer than I'd like to admit, is that they weren't villains. My mom worked doubles at a diner for years. My dad showed up to the same job for 2 decades. They loved their kids in the way they understood love to work, which was loudly and visibly for Cole and quietly and distantly for me. That gap wasn't cruelty. It was a failure of imagination. They couldn't picture what I was building, because nothing in their experience gave them the language for it. And that doesn't make it hurt less, but it does make it make sense. Here's what I know about intelligence. It isn't just what you can figure out. It's what you're willing to face. For a long time, I kept recalculating. Maybe if I called more. Maybe if I explained it differently. Maybe if I made my achievements small enough that they didn't feel threatening or far away. That's not intelligence. That's hope mistaken for strategy. Real intelligence is updating your expectations when the evidence stops supporting them. And resilience. I used to think resilience meant absorbing pain without showing it. That's not what it is. Resilience is Dr. Okonkwo sitting with me for 5 minutes outside that auditorium and me letting her. Resilience is walking across that stage anyway, smiling anyway, eating those tiny sandwiches at the reception and meaning it when I left. It's building a life in Baltimore that doesn't require my parents to understand it in order to be real. My grandmother understood something I'm still learning to fully believe, that the people who see you clearly are not always the people you were born to. She kept a notebook full of things I'd said. She left me $8,000 and a letter. She died and left a shape in my life that nothing has filled, and I think nothing is supposed to. Some losses you carry, not because you're weak, but because what you lost was genuinely worth carrying. The charity game happened. My graduation also happened. Both are true. I got my degree and my parents got a weekend in Springfield and Cole got to play baseball with his friends, and all of those things occurred in the same universe in the same May, and I have made my peace with that. Not because it was okay, but because peace is something you choose, not something you're given. I kept the ribbon this time. That's not a small thing. For a long time, I threw away evidence of my own worth, because no one around me seemed interested in it. I don't do that anymore. I am a good doctor. I earned that. I stood in an auditorium in Baltimore with no family in the seats and I earned it anyway. That's the only kind of earning that actually counts.